G'day viewers, how they hanging? Peter here. I'm just playing around with this carburetor off the Victa mini bike engine, and I actually have got a soft spot for this carburetor. I quite like it because it's very simple, it's very understandable, and it's just such a sensible way of doing the task that it's easy for me to repair, because I don't think I could have done it any better or more simply. So it's easy for me to understand with the way my brain works anyway. So let's come in the shed and I'll, if you're interested, I'll explain how this one works, because there's a lot of them around. All right, so this is the die cast part, and I'll give you a little bit of a rundown. No one's taught me this. This is just simply stuff I've learnt as I've gone about my business. So I suppose I'll start with, I'm not sure what's going to be in focus. Now this is the float, and as you can see it's 3 pieces of brass. So to manufacture this, they have these 2 punched out cups, I suppose you'd call them, and they're symmetrical and identical. So the first thing they do is they solder 2 of those together, and then if you look carefully, it's there's a tube down the middle that they've soldered in to form the float. Now there's a pinhole of solder there, but I don't think that's a repair. I think that's just dripped from the manufacturing process. So very simple brass float. The float chamber, it's a piece of die cast, and the bung that goes in the bottom, it has no jet. It's simply a bung with a fibre washer. So if you can imagine that that goes on that, and the float goes in there, and the only other thing I might mention at this stage is you have this, I'll call it a primer button, and when you're starting it, you depress this. Some people call it a tickle the carby, and it will actually fill up the float chamber, and see that hole there, fuel will come out of there. But if you look at this button, all that it does is it pushes the float down. So that's all it does. So if you push the float down, the needle and seat, which is there, allows fuel to come in, and it raises the fuel level up to the level of that relief hole. So that's all it does. So if you can imagine that is on top of that, hang on, this is all very difficult one-handed. So that goes on like that. So that is very simple. So that's the float and the range. So I can get that out of the way because that's the easy part. Now, the next part is the emulsion tube. So really, this is the whole carby. This is where it all happens. Now you can see there's a jet there, and there's a jet in the bottom, and I don't know if you can see that there's a hole up the guts, but there is also the emulsion tube, and the emulsion tube comes out to that point there, is connected inside, but I don't know if you can see that. Now that orifice there coincides with this orifice here at the bottom, at the 6 o'clock position there, and that simply comes out in the main slide port. So this is indexed. See that cut out there? I love the simplicity of this. That is machined out at a 45-degree angle. I'm not sure if you can see that. It's not an L, it's a 45 degree. It's just a chamfer. So if you look at these, where are they? If we look at these two, the light is not so good to see those two threaded holes there. They correspond to these two identical little brass screws, and they have a little piece of parallel protrusion. Now the top one, when you screw that screw in, you end up with an intrusion into the slide port, and the slide has a groove down it so that the slide can't rotate, and what that causes is that the chamfer on the front of the slide is indexed to the mouth of the carby, and that makes sense. Now the thing that I find beautiful about this engineering is, and the bottom one, that indexes into this slot, and then because it's got a 45 degree chamfer, as you screw it in, it actually applies a downward force because it's at 45 degrees on this washer, and so it seals the emulsion tube. So it seals the emulsion tube down. And then the only other next thing I think I need to do is we have this, that's the petrol hose inlet, and that simply goes to there, and it's just a 90 degrees to, where's the needle and seat? There's the needle, which is interestingly, it's made of copper. So this whole thing, the body of the carb is die cast, but the materials involved I'm very impressed with. I mean, it's got a beautiful float, brass float. The emulsion tube is brass. Petrol inlet is brass. Oh, sorry, I forgot this. This main jet goes in the bottom of the emulsion tube. It screws into here. So the jet screws into the bottom of the emulsion tube, and so does the mounting bolt for the float bowl. And this collar that you can see screws around to clamp it on the mower. Can you see, this is a die cast body, but there's an insert of what looks to me like a Bakelite material or phenolic paper, some sort of resin. And that is a heat insulator to try and keep the engine hot and the carby cool. And that piece of that brass clamp that goes around with a screw in it, if you look closely, that is forged brass. It's not cast, it's forged, and see there's a little bit of machining. They're like, the amount of work in that, it's incredible what they used to do back in the 1950s. And although this is a 70s one, but the carby was from the 50s. So I think that's basically the operation of it. But what can you see? The light's a bit wrong, isn't it? Petrol comes in here, air goes in that side. This is attached to the motor. Slide goes in the top. Turn it around. We have a tickler. And just beautiful engineering. Now, when I got this carby was from the 1970s, and it had been left as garden art. So this needle and seat was full of a green plasticine-like material, which I think was BP Zoom. I don't know if BP's in other countries. I know it's in Europe. BP's a petrochem company. And BP Zoom was the go-to for two-stroke, but the additive was green, and I think there was petrol left in it, and it just solidified into a glutinous mass, and it was actually quite difficult to clean out, but I did clean it out. And the other trouble I had with this jet screws into this emulsion tube, And I think from the factory it had never ever been disassembled, and I put a screwdriver down there and it was unreasonably tight. And I thought, I did contemplate, well, rather than trying to break something, I'll just squirt it with carby cleaner and hope for the best. But I was pretty unhappy with that, and I thought, well, it's been together for 50 years and it doesn't want to come apart now. But what I did, I'll show you my solution to the problem, if this will, I'm trying to do this one-handed for you fellas and not having a great deal of success, but this could be interesting for somebody that might end up in a similar spot. Okay, so you can see how that emulsion tube now has gone through there, and I indexed that correctly and put that screw in so that it can't rotate. I don't know if you can see down there. So that's what I had, and that jet was stuck in there and I couldn't get it out. And the only way I could think to do that was, I'll just show you, was to use my impact driver. Now this is a manual one that, as you can see, it's got a 1/2 inch square adapter that I put a flat screwdriver bit into it, and then you hit it with a mash hammer. Now if I'd tried to do that with this unsupported, all I was going to do was drive that down, because I tried with this gunsmith type screwdriver here, and there was no way known I could get that, and I felt that I was going to break something. So what I wound up doing was I found this long series socket, which, as you can see, goes in there and protrudes a small amount, and then I put it in my small vise that was left to me from my father, little 3-inch Carter. And as you can see, once I did that up, then I could proceed with my impact screwdriver, and I put that in there and whacked it with a hammer, making sure I was going in the correct direction, and it actually got it out. So I was actually then quite pleased with myself. So I got that jet out and cleaned it, and now of course I'll assemble it not so tightly so that in the future anyone else can clean it in the future. So I was pretty pleased with myself for that. The only other thing I did, if you look at this, what have I got here? Can you see that is my easy out with this is the remnants of the petrol tap. So as you can see, this fuel tank, this is what I might use on a mini bike one day. So obviously that was in there, and the fuel tap has broken off, and it's only plastic. So I put an easy out in, unscrewed that, and the tank is not at all rusty inside. So I do have plans